Holy cow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is a home I want to go to. So thank you, thank you. Would you pray with me? May I say what I need to say, and may you hear what you need to hear. Amen. So, a version of this sermon was written earlier this week. And for me, the weekly trajectory of crafting a sermon usually goes like this. 1, I have an idea. 2, I write a sermon. 3, I start to question the sermon. 4, I panic and think the sermon is a true disaster. 5, something happens later in the week that turns the key, that opens it all up for me and reminds me that a sermon is not a show. A sermon is a slippery, special art form that is not about me and is not about my anxieties at all, but is about us. Something always happens later in the week that yanks me out of my self-obsessed myopia and reminds me that a sermon at its best is not simply a speech that is meant to be successful, whatever that means. But instead, a sermon is a portal to possibility. A sermon is an invitation. It is a vulnerable act of practicing radical hope in a world that too often keeps showing us over and over more and more reasons to be hopeless. And this specific sermon that I am now offering to you this morning has taken its own course this past week. I knew that I wanted to use this sermon to remind myself and all of us that we are a community of radical hope. I know we got a lot of folks in this space who don't know that they can quite get behind the word faith, so we don't know that we're a faith community. We can have that discussion too. But I feel like as we call ourselves a people, a community of radical hope, I have seen the nods. I've seen the smiles. I've seen the folks try to figure out how to actually exercise that hope muscle, even in all of the messiness that we see in our individual and collective lives. That we are a community that can live into those words from the book of Isaiah that Reverend Bridget just read. And that we are a community of radical hope that can say to ourselves and say to one another and say to the world, look, we are doing a new thing. Do you yet perceive it? We will make a way in the wilderness and we will make rivers in the desert, especially when so much of the current landscape in front of us looks like wearying wilderness and devastating desert. I knew that I wanted to kick off our season of radical hope with the question that is written on all of your tables, and you've got markers. You can answer that question on your tables, just like we're in Sunday school. I wanted to start off with that question, what/who gives you radical hope? And I still want to know your answers, but something happened this week, and in the interest of staying rooted in reality, it needs to be named again. This past week, our beloved congregant and friend Kirsten Paulus, one of the spryest, healthiest, 80-some-year-old women that I have ever known, went into the hospital. And then within a few days, she died. Now, first of all, have you ever seen anyone who can rock a crisp white shirt in the way that Kirsten Paulus can? That, to me, I can still feel the glare in this space. Kirsten Paulus is one of the people who gives me radical hope and who has given me radical hope for the years that she's been here. And just last Sunday, she was sitting right back there, right basically in that area where you might see Keen. Keen, raise your hand. Emil, raise your hand. That's like the Kirsten section right there. Just last Sunday, she was sitting there, and this Sunday, she should be sitting right there, and I am so angry that she is not sitting right there. So maybe you knew Kirsten, Maybe you'd gotten to know her well, maybe you'd always intended to get to know her better, maybe you have no reference for who I'm even talking about, and no matter what, there is a Kirsten-shaped hole in our congregation this morning. Whether you have come to this sacred space this morning weighed down by the loss of Kirsten, whether you have entered this place feeling gutted by personal anxieties or disappointments or grief, or whether you are more focused on the weight of our ongoing collective anxieties and disappointments and grief, and heck, maybe you're weighed down by all of that this morning, I want to say, welcome home. Welcome home to a place where we have a home for your anxieties, for your disappointments, for your grief. Welcome home to this alchemical happening where hopefully together we will conjure all of those things together and try our best to not ignore what they actually are, but together recreate them into radical hope. Because this is who we are. This is home, not only this physical space, but this balancing act between naming the very real realities that we are facing and naming the very possible futures that we are called to co-create in hope and in community. And if this were a different kind of church, that pressure that you're feeling pushing down on you might be met with a perfectly packaged brand of saccharine, rose-tinted hope that might keep you afloat for a little while, but would quickly deflate after you left this room. But instead, you get this tearful, sweaty pastor in front of you. And I hope that's okay, because we are not that kind of saccharine church. Here we do not deny the realities and we do not force the hope. So what do we do? This morning, to cap off our homecoming weekend, we are using this service to launch a season of radical hope. Get ready for 6 weeks where basically we're going to take St. Octavia Butler up there and we're going to plunge through all of her writings in the parable of the sower and the parable of the talents, and Reverend Bridget and I are going to lead everyone through reminding ourselves all of the ingredients that we have, no matter what happens in November, no matter what happens far beyond. We are going to remind ourselves of the toolkit that we have, that reminds us that we have radical hope even in a hopeless world. We've got exploding electronic devices terrorizing, and we've got cops shooting folks in the subway. We know we have hopelessness threatening to flatten us around every corner. We've got ongoing genocides ravaging increasingly vulnerable populations. We've got a news cycle that just keeps pummeling us over and over and over again, and maybe even moving us to spiral into a deeper and deeper cynicism. Bringing up a term like radical hope in times like these might feel like an act of optimistic aggression. But I want to assure you that I am not simply in Pollyanna pilot mode. And to prove it, I want to invite you right now, just for a few minutes, to focus less on the word hope and to focus instead right now on the word radical. For the linguist freaks among us, I'm going to give you some etymology. The word radical can mean several things at the same time, and the 3 most operative definitions for us here today are radical, very different from the usual or traditional. Radical, of or relating to the origin. Radical, of, relating to, or proceeding from a root. Radical, of, relating to, or proceeding from a root. How often do you take the time to realize how much of what you do, so many of the actions and choices that push you beyond the limits that you thought you had actually, that those things actually have deep, deep roots? Here at Judson, every new program that pops out of this place has deep, deep roots in everything that has happened in this building since the 1890s. How often do you take the time to realize how much of what we do here at Judson that pushes us beyond the limits of what a church is supposed to be has deep, deep roots? How often do you take the time to realize that hope is a radical act, meaning that here at Judson and in your own seeking heart, hope is an active verb, a muscle that you are invited to exercise and has deep, deep roots. If we want to frame it using smart philosophical words, I'm going to bring in Ernst Bloch. I know there are some Ernst Bloch freaks in the space too. So we can look to deep thinker Ernst Bloch, who in the 1950s offered a big book called The Principle of Hope. And in the wake of this past week, his questions ring so true. He said, who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? What are we waiting for? And what awaits us? And then Herr Bloch ventured a guess for how to answer these questions. He said, many only feel confused. The ground shakes. They do not know why and with what. Theirs is a state of anxiety. If it becomes more definite, then it is fear. It is a question of learning hope. Hope's work does not renounce. Hope is in love with success rather than failure. Hope, superior to fear, is neither passive like fear nor locked into nothingness. The emotion of hope goes out of itself. It grows from itself. It tendrils out from the root and makes people broad instead of confining them. The work of hope requires people who throw themselves actively into what is becoming, a thing to which they themselves belong. So to put Herr Bloch's words in slightly more provocative terms, here are some questions for you. Do you know that you belong to hope? Do you feel that you belong to hope? Do you know that you and hope have deep, deep roots? I titled this homecoming sermon Project Radical Hope because I wanted to really drive home the point that with horrifying things like Project 2025 and basically the entire empire project of the past several millennia looming over us, choosing radical hope and actually making a project of it is not just a branding strategy. It is not just because there are some people that are allergic to calling us a people of faith. It isn't just branding. It is actually a way of choosing life over death, of choosing curiosity over fear, of choosing creation over hate. I believe that here at Judson, at our best, we are doing both a new thing here and we are doing a deeply rooted thing here, and it's about time we actually start perceiving it. At our best, we are actually making a way in the wilderness and making rivers in the desert. And notice the tense that I'm using. We will not be doing this in the future. We are doing it right now with me sweating in front of you. We are doing it right now. I'm saying that we are actually doing hope, exercising hope, learning hope right now just by gathering here and recommitting to another way. And with the loss of Kirsten, I feel like I don't have time today to more elegantly massage today's thesis. Don't worry, in 2 weeks I will be back and I will find all of the poetic ways to try to tell you the thesis of this. On some other Sunday, I feel like I will find like the perfectly tuned phrase and I will be back in love with success and with the sermon doing a very, very specific thing. But our time here on this mortal plane is very short. And I feel that more than ever right now. So I want to say it bluntly and I want to say it baldly, and I even kind of feel like I'm saying it badly. But let's be honest. This place and all of us here can be pretty annoying a lot of the time. I mean, I annoy myself, many of you annoy me, I annoy you, many of you annoy one another, I get the emails, okay? But annoying one another is not the opposite of creating hope together. How can you be annoyed with one another? How can you be annoyed with me and the fact that I didn't actually create like a perfectly packaged sermon today? How can you be annoyed with that, but then actually remember that we are rooted in hope together and that there are beautiful, beautiful ways that we are tendriling out of that root in ways that we can't even perceive, but we are called to perceive. So, can you perceive it? We have to start over again each time we gather here, and we have to reimagine who we are and who we are becoming all the time. And that's what radical hope is. Radical hope is the understanding that we have roots that ground us in belonging so that we can tendril out, grow up from that root without disappearing into despair, without fearing that we have no sense of where we're coming from, where we are, or where we need to go, because hope is a muscle that needs to be exercised, and home is a muscle that needs to be exercised. And that is truly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, that is truly why Project 2025 and anything else like it quite literally cannot actually have the final word. Because Project 2025 and its partners actually have no ingredients. They have nothing in their toolkit but hate and fear. Project Radical Hope, and we will be telling you all of those ingredients, and then you can tell me later on what are the ingredients that we actually forgot. Project Radical Hope actually has the ingredients that will help us to choose life over death, to choose creation over destruction, and that is truly, truly our call to exercise radical hope. And if we will actually lean into both the rootedness and into the growing, we cannot go wrong. And if we do go wrong, we find our way back to the root, back to home, back to our belonging, and we grow again from the future. I have no clean way to bring this sermon to a close. I am a mess. And I feel at home being a mess in this place with you today. So instead of trying to wrap this up with some gospel-infused bow, I'm actually going to answer the question on your tables for myself. Who gives me radical hope? I'm going to say it again. Kirsten Paulus. Many of you might have been here this past July when we were wrapping up our sermon series on queering. And Kirsten presented a short reflection on what the act of queering had started to mean for her. And I know that we still have some questions among us about whether we should be using the word queering. I don't want to hear those questions anymore. Because you're about to hear what Kirsten had to say about it, and it better have you like leaping out of your seat and wanting to queer the world. Last night, I could not sleep. When I heard that Kirsten had died, and I had had a moment where I could whisper in her ear, but I still could not sleep, and I found myself just listening to the speech that she had given over and over and over again, mostly just so that I could hear her voice, but also so that I could hear how gorgeously, at over 80 years of age, how generously Kirsten was actively choosing to lean into curiosity and growth and radical hope. This white, straight, cisgender grandmother was leaning into the radical hope of queering herself. So instead of trying to really bring this sermon home today, I actually want to rest in the home of Kirsten's words from that day. And as I read these words, I want you to imagine Kirsten saying them. And I want you to just close your eyes for a moment. Imagine her pushing herself to say these words in front of her home community. Kirsten was constantly telling me that she didn't know if she was radical enough to be part of the community at Judson. Kirsten actually, when I went to visit Kirsten in the hospital for the first time, her family said, yeah, Kirsten was always saying she doesn't know that she's woke enough to be at Judson. But I think you will easily perceive her expanding radicality. So here's Kirsten. I've been asked to share my reflections on my experience of queering. And my first experience was trying to figure out what queering actually is. And I realized that for me, it's a new lens and a new way of looking at things. The lens I usually use is my life lens, my personality, my introversion, my sarcasm, my education, my family, my values. And that's not a bad lens. It could stand some adjusting. But generally, it served me well. But the queer lens, to me, is a completely clean lens. It's a way of looking at things without a filter so that I can say, I never thought about it that way. I never looked at it that way. And my first example of that was Sex Worker Sunday at Judson. I had never thought that sex work could be a choice, that it could be a source of financial freedom and independence, and I'd certainly never thought that porn could be art. My second experience is a little more personal. My granddaughter, who lives in Denver, announced this summer that she was going to a Christian camp. So I looked at that through my life filter, and that information includes the fact that her aunt considers herself the only lesbian Muslim in Denver. Her other grandparents are Muslim. There's Christian nationalism exploding. There's the right to life taking effect. There's cults. There's evangelicalism. And my reaction was, oh my God, how could this happen in my family? What have we done wrong? Should I go out and stage an intervention? And then I remembered something Reverend Bridget had said a few weeks ago, which was, if something rings the wrong chimes in you, step back, have another look, figure out what's going on. So I took my queer lens and I looked again and I thought, maybe I should wonder where this child is on her spiritual journey. Maybe I should ask what she hopes will happen there. Maybe I should even ask if she is on a spiritual journey or if there's something else going on. And my third experience was when Micah called me a couple of days ago and asked me to get up and reflect in front of you. And through my life experience, I knew that I'm an introvert. I hate to speak in public. I don't like all lights on me. Those lights are glaring. I have nothing to say, and if I did, I would say it badly. So, no, I won't do it. And then that little queer thing that has somehow resided in me raised its teeny little head and said, wait a minute. What just happened? What did you just do? Micah asked you for help and you said no? Think again, Missy. So I looked at it not through my personal lens, but my queer lens. And I realized this isn't about me and my personality and what stresses me out. This is about us and about Micah, whom I love and who's asked me to do something. How hard is it just to get up and do it? So I am. And to end these reflections, I'll say that looking at things through a queer lens has enabled me to say, I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it that way. And that has brought me peace, actually, in connection particularly with my granddaughter, and also the joy of discovering new things. And end quote. Kirsten. What a fucking remarkable woman. What a remarkable invitation. You are remarkable people. You are the people who give me radical hope. Every single one of you. So what and who gives you radical hope? Can we recommit today to nurturing it, cultivating it, practicing it with the time we've got? We are in this together for however many years or months or weeks or days we've got together. We belong to one another and we belong to radical hope together. We belong to the Judson that we are co-creating, not just the Judson that has been. And until it's time to go, until homecoming comes for each and every one of us, I want to go out with you. I want to go out with you no matter what happens over the next few weeks, no matter what happens way beyond the next few weeks. I want to go out with you with radical hope, hoping for and radically co-creating the future that we know deep in our roots is actually not only possible, but is actually already baking in our bones. So thank God or Goddess or the universe that there is no way to cleanly wrap up this sermon because this radical hope thing is messy. But I'm so glad to be getting messy in radical hope with all of you. So Tom and Leslie and Lulu, go ahead and start coming up here so that I shut up. Take us into this with some creative reflection.